This is the one and only IT in the D Show. I'm your host, Bob Waltonspiel, hanging out with co-host, producer extraordinaire, Randy Walker. Guest this week, Aaron Wilkerson. You might know him from the Detroit low-key data meetup. You might know him as the data and analytics let me see if I can say that 3 times. Data and analytics leader over at Carhartt, and overall cool guy. It's going to be a great conversation. We haven't been talking about DNA in a long time, so great to catch up with Aaron. Hey, you can find us online, itinthed.com. Do us a favor, give us a like on the socials, subscribe to us everywhere fine podcasts are sold. We're super excited for our meetups for the next 6 months. We're going to be at Scout Ferndale, and we have teamed up with the folks at Scrum Detroit, David Wan, and also with Aaron that's on the show today with the low-key data meetups. We're going to be the socials, we're going to combine efforts, and then we're going to put out some content. So be on the lookout, meetup.com/itinthed. If you want to do some specific content regarding software dev or data, we're going to have speakers and cool content. If you want to just be low key, go to the traditional old IT and the events. So excited to be teaming up with those two. Aaron, thank you for let me drag you away from the TV during the Lions game, man. Good to see you. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be on the show. I love what you guys are doing here.
I appreciate that. Yeah, Lions just went up 21-7, Randy, because I know you're watching anxiously. You're
here.
I didn't even know they were playing tonight. You're right.
Little football game going on.
Yeah. Aaron, I got to dive in, man. Data quality. If you're in the DNA space, there isn't one customer we've talked to or one data head where data quality isn't an issue, problem, something they're tackling, number one on their initiative list. Is this because AI or is this just because legacy data scattered? Why is data quality kind of everyone's top of the tongue these days?
Yeah, I mean, data quality is always something that we've struggled with in the data world. I think you have a couple of things. I think AI is a big one. A lot of people want to dig into these AI initiatives, but as a lot of people know, AI is really built off of the quality of the data in your organization. So if you have bad data in your organization, like what's the AI going to train on? It's going to train on bad data in your organization. But the tricky part is it's always tough to tackle because, that data got there because of either bad business processes or you have software that is not configured properly. So people are putting in wrong information, a lot of blanks. Always throw an example out of if you're into Salesforce and you're a salesperson, you're just trying to go through the workflow to make sure that the organization knows how much you're selling. So when it comes to putting in phone numbers, email addresses, you may not have that. So you start clicking next. You realize that you're missing phone numbers, the contact names are wrong. But from a salesperson, you're like, hey, I'm just trying to get through the workflow. I don't really care about how you guys are doing this data. Yep. So it's always tricky to try to understand what's good enough. Then going back to the business workflow and saying, okay, how do you properly get the right data into the application so you can pull it out on the other side? But those are tough conversations to have because people are incentivized differently. So if you have a salesperson who's only incentivized on showing their sales pipeline, they're not incentivized on good data quality, correct phone numbers, correct addresses, email addresses. That's not how their performance reviews are written. So it's how do you get people to care about data quality? That's always the question, which is very hard to do.
Well, I remember, I was just thinking of, as you were talking about that, thinking of the term shadow IT, which doesn't come up much anymore. It used to come up in the early days of cloud. Yep. That has to be a term in your world where people are just pardon the expression, saving shit wherever they want. And it's not in a ubiquitous format. And then here you are going, I need to sort through all this. It's kind of like my wife with her clothes and her stuff in her room. She puts all these piles together. And then once a month it takes her a day and a half to instead of just putting them away, correct the first time. She doesn't listen to the show. She doesn't care. But you get the analogy, right? It's kind of like you're just putting stuff wherever. And then all of a sudden it takes you a whole entire weekend just to get it back where it should have been in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, it's humans, humans do they come up with these wacky, wonky processes just to get through the day to whatever makes sense for them. So like I said, a lot of the shadow IT is just like spreadsheets. You could have a great tool, great software, but people will create things separately, their own spreadsheets. Shadow IT could just be a bunch of Excel spreadsheets that are all bolted together. to be able to get stuff done. But that's the challenge, is saying, okay, you guys can put all that stuff in spreadsheets, but we have no way of collecting that information unless you try to give us a bunch of spreadsheets, which we can't do anything with that. So I think that's the trick is it's human behavior. I mean, it's not even like a data problem. It's more like a human problem, a business process problem, much more than it's a data problem.
See, I'm going to blame it on product makers and marketers. I think when they came out with the term data lake, and I remember when, like, this is what, 2015, 16, the first time I heard that phrase, and I go, what the hell is a data lake? And they go, it's a central repository to put data. I go, like a store, like what we've been doing. Like, what are you putting in? What is it? And now you have, like, it's a data lake house and a data control tower. And we're like, nothing's changed, but they're putting these words around it. How do you, I guess, how do you as an actual practitioner, how do you make sense of all this goofy stuff marketers are putting product names around?
I mean, you're right. I mean, that's the vendors it's a tough one because they'll sell you all these features and options and things like that when they're buying the software. So, they'll get you in for the demo, but when it's time to turn all this stuff on, that's where the problems realize, because you realize that you have to figure out how to make all this stuff work. So hopefully there were some strong use cases, usually they're not, but like hopefully you have strong use cases to justify the purchase, because if you have to buy the software to figure out how to use it, you already got a strike against you.
Yeah.
So that's where I think a lot of it is trying to get in front of it. When you're in the sales meeting, in the demos, you have to ask the hard questions to say, okay, how are we going to use this? Who's going to maintain this? They're showing all these different workflows, these pretty screens. All right, who's going to put all the information into these screens? Because if I have to input 50 pieces of information just to make the screen work, they know who's going to do that. So I think the tricky part is trying to get ahead of it if you can. But if you can't, then it's just a large undertaking trying to get these tools to work. Like the data lakes, I mean, we used to call them data swamps because no one knew what they were. So you just threw a bunch of data in there. You hope that someone can make use of it. You spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on Hadoop clusters and data scientists, and then no one can use it. Leadership got upset and they fired everybody and got rid of that stuff. So I think the biggest thing is trying to, before you spend money, spend a dime, understand the use case and ask the hard questions. How are we going to use this? Who's going to maintain this? How does the business get benefit from it? To really figure out, how to not waste money on it.
Well, here you have these vendors that are coming, the big two, right? I'm not going to name any because I work with them every day. That, I remember when, this 10 years ago, that companies needed to come out just to make you understand the bill for like Microsoft and AWS, like, because the cloud.
Oh, yeah.
And now you're seeing, like, we had a big, huge company in our office, and he was just talking about, what we had predicted to spend on this tool, even though it's fantastic and doing everything we want. It's 4x, 5x, 8x. And now it's like we don't know. We're so used to it and, using it every day, and it's fantastic. But like now we have to rebudget everything to make sure I can afford this. So now the when's the companies are going to start coming out, and they already started analytics companies, right? To make sense of all the data in those swamps.
Yeah.
It's almost like now it's like to understand those bills, it's starting to, rebirth another industry.
Yeah, I mean that's the dirty secret about like cloud and cloud modernization. Like everyone was sold that the cloud is supposed to be cheaper, easier, low cost, but then like you said, like people spin up these different instances and move everything to cloud. They realize they had garbage code. They don't have the right skill sets to know how to use this stuff, so they spin up these huge bills just to do the same stuff. And that's why you see a lot of companies kind of going back to like on-premise. It's very much like 15, 20 years ago when everyone was trying to outsource their IT department and say, okay, outsourcing IT is going to be cheaper, faster. They realized the quality was terrible and it was way more expensive to outsource their IT, and they brought it back in. So I think we have when we talk about vendors, like we have a big problem with trying to sell these things as cheaper, more efficient. It's like, okay, if you have a brand new company from scratch, I think you have a good opportunity to do that. But if you have a legacy company, you're trying to modernize this stuff, I don't think people realize just how crappy people's code is from like decades ago. You're trying to modernize this stuff. It becomes way too expensive just to run workflows.
Yeah. Well, not only to that, I don't think people do, like us, day job included, like doing a really good job. I think we're past that, like articulating what it really costs to be on-prem versus the cloud. when you get into real estate, electricity, backup, people, right? There's a lot more to it than I think people put in their calculators to cost justify it. And then, I've been a hybrid IT purist since cloud came out. I was selling switch and route at Cisco pre-cloud. So trust me, I've been on all sides of this game.
Yeah.
And like people were never doing the math right. Like you'd have,
Right.
the CIO would read, we need to go cloud because it said in the magazine. Well, why? Because, and they're like, we're not looking at the workflows going, all right, this one's getting hammered all days of the night. We need cloud because we need the elasticity, or, you know what I'm saying? The justification has never been, I don't think anyone's ever nailed it properly.
Yeah. And like I said, it's, all it takes is like one bad month of like leaving on crazy workflows or not understanding the cost to take your whole budget out. And then you're then your CIO, CTO has to go to the CFO and say, yeah, we overshot our budget by like 50% because we didn't understand our costs. Like I said, I think there's a large amount of work now going to analytics around understanding cloud costs. How do you peel back like some of the workflows and workloads and all that to kind of get costs underway? I think that's really, especially in these economic times when, a lot of companies are hurting, people are coming after these different like modernization projects and implementations and giving it a deeper, like I said, analysis around the cost just because of so many bad projects and just understanding why. Like I said, if I'm trying to modernize because I'm a customer facing application, that makes sense. But if you're just trying to redo your IT infrastructure, there's no benefit from it, then like it's why. It's just you just want a 3 to 5 year modernization project that gives them the exact same things they have right now. You just spent millions and millions of dollars on it.
Yeah, and for what? So you got put in I don't want to say compromising situation, but I would say as a data head. You were just a data head, and then all of a sudden AI comes out, and you have to be in the InfoSec world, and you're always going to be in the EA world, talking with in the infrastructure team with enterprise architecture. Were you? I don't want to say were you anticipating this, but how is it to juggle now? You're almost in 3 departments.
Yeah.
And you still need to do business justification, like we were just talking about with costs. Like it's a lot to juggle. Like how did you evolve and how are you maintaining kind of that wearing 4 caps, 5 caps, whatever it is you do today?
Yeah. It's a lot of it is continuous learning. Like within Carhartt, we have kind of an internal group of people that kind of just share the latest news about AI because there's so much. Even yesterday or today or the weekend, California tried to pass a bunch of new AI regulations, and then Governor Newsom vetoed it and said it was too much. So the tricky part is that now education is a huge part of it, and trying to involve your legal team, your cybersecurity team. So you have the continuous learning, and it's also establishing just new relationships with people that you may have talked to, but now it's like, hey guys, we need to understand, like, if we're trying to do X, Y, and Z with AI, like, is there an issue there? Like, if we're trying to use these different AI models, how are they training information? Like the tricky part now of these vendors is they have these, like LinkedIn does is like the setting where like by default, they're able to use your data to train their models. So you have to actually turn off the settings, and you have to kind of look in your contract to figure out how these companies are using your data to train models. And these are existing like companies, like, if you have SAP, if you have Microsoft. So I think the tricky part too is understanding like how the information in your company is being used for these different AI models. So I think a lot of it just, like I said, is education and having to have a lot of conversations around like, hey, can you guys check this contract renewal to make sure they didn't slip in anything? Like if I'm asking a question in Copilot with my company, does this go to Microsoft? Like that's the sneaky part. Cause of course the vendors sometimes don't know. Like you talk to your sales guy, they're like, oh, sure, we don't. We realize that he didn't know what he was talking about. So you have to double check of the writing and all, and it's just everything. So it's a much more hands-on.
So let's get into the vendor side, because I always like crapping on bad salespeople, because that's what I've been doing for a living for the last 25 years. Data is a weird space because you can have one vendor or you can have 17 vendors to do what you need to do, from Kafka streaming to your warehousing, to your quality, to your analytics, to your reporting, to your and everything in between your data lakes, your data lake house, like all of the, like, how do you determine a philosophy to come to the table with, and how do you manage all the damn phone calls you get every day from people like me that shall remain nameless?
I mean, you should see my LinkedIn DM. It's just like endless people about some brand new tool. I mean, to be honest, like we try to, I mean, we think about simplicity. I mean, we did a lot of conversations around like the modern data stack and composability and like being able to swap things out, but it's just too much to manage. Like as a data leader, I don't want to have to manage like 10 different, like, it's great that this niche company can do this very specific thing. It's like, that's another contract. That's more contracting terms. It's another line on my budget. Now I have to put like a separate vendor in my budget because that can get cut. So I would say we try to consolidate as much as we can and kind of go with the big vendors as much as we can, just because it just makes my life simple not to have like 10 different conversations around like this vendor reach out to me, or like different renewals. I can have all these different renewal cycles. I have to figure out from a budget perspective, issuing POs. I have different support relationships. So as much as we can, we try to simplify, kind of go with as less vendors, just from a vendor management perspective. But of course, you also don't want to go put all your eggs into one basket. So I think you can have a couple, but I think trying to have specific vendor for specific problems is just not realistic. Also, your team, like if I have a team, I have to train my people on different tools, different capabilities. Like I don't have enough time to train my whole entire team, all this stuff. It's just too much.
And they're going to push you to get certified.
Certification. So I think that's why you see a lot of these kind of SaaS, like a lot of people go in these SaaS companies, a lot of them are growing out of business just because the budgets aren't there and people just aren't buying because they just don't want to deal with more vendors.
Someone asked me the other day, like, what's the difference? Like they go, you tell me, because I don't want to listen to the sales guy. You tell me, what's the difference between this and that? And it was big vendor versus specialized vendor. And I said, listen, it's like getting a bagel at Steve's Deli versus getting a bagel at Meijer. You know, you can toast up a bagel at Meijer and and it's fine. It's good bagel. But like Steve's Deli, man, that's a bagel. Like you're going to, you're going to tell your friends about that bagel. But I go, and it really depends on, do you need a good bagel or do you need do you just want to get, do you need a nice breakfast real quick? So, it's a bad analogy, but it's kind of, I think that sums it up right. Like it's just easier to get because it's right here. I don't have to drive an hour,
And imagine trying to justify. I mean, you're in those budget conversations. They're looking for cuts, and you're having to justify 8 to 10 vendors, and your leader's gonna be like, "Are you trying to tell me that you know the difference between all these guys, and is that much different?" Or the question's gonna be, "Hey, doesn't so and so do that too?" You're like, "They do," but you're trying to explain the nuances. And it's like, "Are you willing to go back to that vendor?" Probably not.
Well, Bob said it's a really good bagel, so I should use it.
Right. He gave me a great deal. He gave me 10% off. It's a way better bagel. They use a different, like the water they use is different. You're like, and your leader's like, "Are you seriously getting that?" Right.
So in terms of you, let's go back to the InfoSec thing. Cause like, we sit down and have AI conversations and the people look at me and said, if you talk about data quality or security, I'm throwing you out. I'm like, well, we're stopping talking about AI, but like, InfoSec's another animal all in of itself, and then dealing with legal.
Yeah.
Like, how are you navigating that? Like between your CISO and your legal department, and the SOC and privileged data, and just like do they give you? I don't want to say do they give you responsibility for it, but you are technically, because it's all part of the game. How are you navigating all that?
Yeah. So we have regular conversations. I think we have a good relationship with our legal team where they schedule, I think, monthly meetings just to kind of talk about, because also we're a retail apparel, we have an e-commerce brand, right? So we also have consumer data. So there's also conversations around like, what does the company do with consumer data? There's Consumer Protection Acts. So we have a good team where we have people on the legal side who are having those conversations around InfoSec and data security and all those things. So I think it's just it's the cost of doing business. You just have to have ongoing conversations about it. And it has to just become, it's hard to get people together because it's not the most exciting topic in the world talking about that, but it's just you just have to have the pattern around just having the conversation once a month and having a direct lead, someone who actually is your point of contact within the department to kind of have these conversations. But like I said, it's just the cost of doing business nowadays, and just how data has become so important, but also there's just a lot of hands in the mix too.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point with consumer data. We dealt with this recently with the autos, and there's people out there salivating to get their hands on your consumer data. And there's pretty big companies that have really nice products to pre-package it and to marketplace it and to sell it off. And then you have your metadata, which you don't feel so guilty about, but you're not going to make as much money. Like as a corporation, how do you toe that line? Because I mean, it's got to be tough to turn that down when people are throwing so much money at you guys. I'm not saying you aren't. You don't have to tell me, but it just that.
I think a lot of companies have just kind of core principles. Like I was at a different company before I was at Carhartt, and that was just kind of a stance around like, yeah, we don't sell consumer data. So I think a lot of companies are coming out and saying that like, we just don't sell consumer data, because you also realize, yes, you can make some money off of it, but if your customers get wind that you're selling their information to like a third party, and that's where they're getting spam, like you're going to lose that customer. So it's are you willing to take the $100 per customer to lose out on the $10,000 lifetime value of that customer? So like, is the juice worth the squeeze? And I think like you have that relationship with your customer. And I think there's a somewhat trust there, but they realize that you're making money off that. But I mean, for example, like LinkedIn, Facebook, that you expect that, they're monetizing your data, but you also get that for free. But if I'm paying a company for a service or product, plus they're also getting more money off me because they're selling my data, then it's like it's a weird kind of feeling.
But we've accepted it with, I don't mean to crap on DTE. They're a great company, but I'll crap on Verizon because they've been down today. But like we've come to expect it when you get a new phone number, like how the hell, when you move, the realtors just destroy your name. So like I'm starting to get mail, and I've been in this house 2 days and I'm getting phone calls already on this brand new phone number. It's funny the things that we'll accept, but like certain, like with a brand like Carhartt, like we were like, oh my God, you guys sold my name. I hate your guts. Like what, you know what I mean? It's a very, very, very tight rope we walk.
Yeah. It's the brands that we feel closer to versus the folks that you're like, all right, I went to the post office, they did a change of address, but all of a sudden the post office saw my information. Now everyone's telling me about welcome to the neighborhood. Like, how the hell do you know that I moved? Like, or even just like public information. I think also just a lot of these places just find information because a lot of it's public. Like once you register or buy a house, that becomes on the public record, and they have these ways to kind of scrape your information to get that too. So is just like people are just more smarter about how they find their information because it's out there. It's, you got to put a little effort in there, but yeah, they can find it.
Sure. So going back to the top of the pyramid. What's your biggest struggle? Like I know everybody, what keeps you up at night? It's like the favorite term no one's allowed to say. But honestly though, what's like, screaming kids during a podcast. What's your favorite? No, I mean like what's at the end of the day, what's some of your biggest struggles that you deal with? Just, did we talk about it already, or is there something deeper?
I mean, to me as a leader, I think it's trying to make sure that there's a connection to what the work we're doing. It's easy to kind of get in the weeds around working on projects and initiatives and tasks, but trying to keep in mind, like, are we really like providing value to the business? Are we doing stuff that matters? Does the team feel connected to the work they're doing is a benefit to the business? It's kind of like that very base, tackling around like, the team is here for a function to serve the organization. Are we good at that? Do people understand it? Does the team feel connected? 'Cause I think as a leader, like, is that you're in kind of the middle area around like you're trying to serve the business, but you also have like this team of people who you're leading. So it's like, okay, how am I doing at that? Because especially you work in technology and data, it's easy to lose track of that. Like, hey, like, we're here, like, data in itself is nothing. It's like what you do with the data is like how to use it to help the business, to make decisions. That's the trick. So I think trying to keep in mind, I think if you work in like sales, you work in marketing or like those customer facing roles, it's very easy to say, okay, we're here to sell the product or make the product or market the product. But if you're in like sometimes these back office where your customers is the business, you really kind of forget about like, hey, the business is actually here to serve the customers as well.
So how do you articulate value to the business? It brings up a good point, because I'm just thinking out loud how I would, and I don't know if I could. How do you?
That's the challenge. I mean, I think it's trying to be transparent and saying like, you have we have stakeholders like everyone else. So I think it's just saying, okay, we just finished our first quarter. It's like, hey, for this quarter, the team did this, then this is why this matters, and we're planning to do X, Y, and Z next quarter, and this is why it matters. But I think if we can't explain why it matters, if I'm trying to talk to the CEO of the company, explain in the minute what we did, if I can't and try to connect that, then like, okay, that's a problem. So I think it's trying to say, I'll talk to the CEO of the company. How would I explain what we did and why it matters and why would she care about it? Would she care about it?
Yeah, I always have these. I talk a lot with InfoSec people, and I always say, "How do you like? What do you say? We only got hacked 3 times this month. Like, how do you articulate it? It's very like that's why InfoSec to me was always like insurance. Like you kind of, it needs to be there, and it's really like not. It's not a value add, but you have to have it. It's like
that's a tough job because you're just like. You're like, if you fail, like game over, right? It's like no time. Like,
right.
There's a breach. You can't like, well, I stopped 10 breaches this month, which saved the company like $10 million in fine.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's like risk mitigation, but it's not very sexy, but it's needed, but it's hard to get anyone excited but cause they just expect it, right? It's like, I expect, I expect my water to flow. I expect the toilets to run.
Yeah.
Like those are thankless jobs. You're not going to get like a bunch of fanfare.
Well, are you starting to fall into that world though? Like, it's kind of like InfoSec going, well, why do I need you if I didn't get hacked? Like,
yeah. And I think that's early days. Yeah. So I think in the early days, I think IT was like that, but I think nowadays people realize the value of data and say, okay, I can make better decisions about my data. I can make better decisions about my business, having access to data and seeing what's going on. So I think that's where we have to focus on like the value added stuff and not just like to run the business, keeping the lights on. So I think that's the trick too, is trying to say, we're going to say no to this stuff that no one cares about. We're going to say yes to the things that the business actually cares about.
Sure.
It's not easy. A lot of people are coming at you, asking for things. You're like, okay, no one cares about that. No one cares about that. Like someone cares about this. Let's work on that.
So I had a really cool meeting this week, and one of the biggest struggles in the autos is like finding the cars that are going to sell in 2029. And so there was like a Gen AI model, and they dumped a bunch of trend data and JD Power data, and they said, "Hey, here's this is what we think is going to sell." I know you don't know the answer, but I'd love to talk to or know this from someone at Carhartt. To like when they sit down and make product, like. It's got to be difficult, especially in fashion. Like, I know Carhartt's pretty, it's gone mainstream. It was always pretty big, pretty normal for like the working person, but like, finding out like what's going to be a hot trend in 2 years, because by the time you design it to by the time it's produced, by the time it's shipped, by the time it's merchandised, it's 2-year projects. I mean, it's that stuff like that is what keeps me up at night, because I'm fascinated by that whole process.
Yeah, it's humans are typically terrible at predicting the future. So,
right.
I mean, some of that is external data, right? You have to look at. So I think customer segmentation is important. Like, do you understand your customers? Do you understand kind of those trends? So I think is bringing in information from the outside to say, okay, we're seeing a new generation, a new demographic come in. Here's like the psycho demographics around. Here's what's important to them. Here's their values, and then you really have to kind of tie your product or your service to like those demographics. So I think that's the trick, is trying to understand your customer, like kind of either you're anticipating your customer needs or you have to understand them and kind of figure out like, how do you tie to that? And some of it's just also product lifecycle management. It's products have a life cycle where people will buy it for X amount of time and then they go on to the next thing. So you also realize, okay, where are we at in the life cycle? Have we sold enough red t-shirts and now we need to figure out a different color? Like there's all these different ways,
I say, look at Stanley. That was our grandpa's thermos, 110-year-old old school soup thermos company. And some guy in some boardroom or some woman in some boardroom, let's make it pink. And then they've literally like 10x, 12x that company overnight. I know it's not that simple, but like absolutely, it's fascinating to me. Like, and one of our customers makes the red Solo cup, and I'm sitting there going like, why don't they have like a double walled red Solo cup? You know what I mean? To market. I guess because I don't know what the hell. I'm not a product marketer. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because I've always been in data, but like the product side is very interesting because, like, can you explain it? Like, some of that stuff is like, did they just strike while the iron is hot? They just say, okay, let's add a color, and all of a sudden just took off. They're like, and they try to make themselves look seem smart and say, yeah, I came up with this model and I did this. I know you just kind of just tried something and they just blew up. You had no way of knowing it was going to be that huge. Where some of
but they're using data. They're using data at the end of the day. You just don't know, like, what did they see, right? Now, I guess if you could bottle it, you would be billionaires. So I guess,
Yeah.
But still at the end of the day, that's why, like, I don't want to say, you guys in InfoSec are unsung heroes. I think, but like, I think at the end of the day, yeah, you are, because like every business decision relies on you making sure you're good at what you do.
Yeah. And I think that's where I think companies are not excited about flying blind anymore. They want access to information to make better decisions. Yeah. They want to know, like, as fast as they can, like, what's going on. Are we hitting our sales? Are we hitting our sales target for the quarter, for the month, for the week? What's selling, what's not selling? I think, you're going to start to see just fast information come at people faster. And then, like, the AI models will help with them with decision making, because also humans can only take on so much information where you're just overwhelmed. Like, this is way too much. My spreadsheets can only do so much. So I think you're going to see a lot just more of generating more information, figuring out how do I process that to make decisions and have visibility. Because, I think people are not looking forward to continuing to be in the dark about how their business is doing. And they're like, yeah, we need to know what's going on to make better decisions. Because I think going off the hip and just kind of going off intuition just is not going to work anymore.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, hey, we're going to cut you loose. Aaron Wilkerson, Carhartt data and analytics leader. You can find him on LinkedIn, but don't send him any DMs about your POC that you want to run in their shop, because he's not going to answer you. I'm just kidding. And then also look for the low key data meetup. Do you where are you posting that so people can find it? Do you want? We're going to start probably posting your events on our meetup too. So
right now it's LinkedIn. So I typically once a month will post the flyer. Also, if you reach out to me and ask about it, I can add you to our email list so you can get updates about it. But typically you can find me on LinkedIn. I post a couple times a week, and usually around the beginning of the month we post about the next meetup event. So if you check it out, you'll find it.
Cool, man. Always good seeing you. Actually, I just saw you a couple of days ago, but good seeing you virtually, and appreciate the time you spent with us. And we missed the second quarter, but we're going to get back for the rest of the Lions game. So go Lions.
Awesome.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate the time.
Go Ryan.
All right. Hey, on behalf of Bob and Randy, do us all a favor. Drink up your drinks. Get your phone numbers. You don't got to go home. You just got to get the hell out of here. See you next week. Drive careful. Beat it.